If you're a woman over 60 and you've ever wondered how the people you raised could become the same monsters who break you, stay with me. Like, share, and subscribe to Twisted Tales and Truths, and tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? Have you ever been betrayed by someone you would have died for? I read every story. They say women grow invisible after 60. But I wasn't invisible in my house. I was a target. My name is Helen Foster. I turned 64 the week my son spit in my face. It was raining that morning. I remember because the roof leaked again, and I had to move the mop bucket under the crack in the ceiling. As I hobbled in my slippers, clutching my aching back, I heard the slam of the front door and boots heavy on the wood. Kyle, my son, 32 years old, no job, 3 DUIs, and a temper hot enough to set fire to wet leaves. He walked past me without a glance, brushed water off his leather jacket right onto my clean floor, then turned and said, "You use the car again, old woman?" Old woman. He used to call me Mama. "No, Kyle," I said, trying to sound calm. "I haven't touched the car. I haven't been anywhere." He came closer, nostrils flared. "Don't lie to me." "I'm not lying, baby." Before I could finish, he spat. A thick string of it hit my cheek. I stood there frozen, not from fear, but from shame. I wiped it with my sleeve. My throat burned. But I said nothing. He laughed, like I was pathetic. Then he shouted, "She took the car again, Dad." And from the living room, I heard the grunt of a man who used to bring me roses. Frank Foster, my husband of 41 years, emerged from the couch like some monstrous bear, reeking of whiskey, belt already looped in one hand. "I told you to stay put, Helen," he growled, voice like gravel under a truck tire. "You don't get to sneak around and disrespect this house. Not when we let you live here." Let me? It was my name on this house when we bought it. My 401k that went into the down payment. My nursing shifts that kept the lights on when Frank gambled. But now I was just the burden. Frank didn't ask questions. He didn't listen. He didn't wait. The belt came down across my back with a crack so sharp it stole the air from my lungs. I stumbled against the table, nearly knocking over the only photograph I had left of my mother. Kyle didn't even blink. Another strike. Then another. My lips split when I hit the floor. The wood grain pressed into my cheek as blood pooled in my mouth. I tasted pennies and shame. "You're lucky we even feed you," Frank hissed. "You think we don't know what you've been hiding? You think you're clever, sneaking around with paperwork like we can't see." My hands shook. He knew. I had been quietly speaking to a legal aid office, trying to figure out if they could help me recover stolen money, my money. Frank had forged my signature on refinancing papers. Kyle had drained my pension through online investments. ID lost almost everything. But I hadn't told them. I hadn't screamed. I'd kept it secret because I still hoped they'd come around. That blood meant something. It didn't. Later that night, they left me alone in the pantry, door locked, no lights, no food. I stayed there, curled up on the dusty floor, smelling spoiled potatoes and rat droppings, with my arms wrapped around my stomach like I could hold myself together. That's when I saw it. The corner panel under the bottom shelf, the one I hadn't touched in years, was slightly cracked. Inside it, years ago, I'd hidden something out of sight during one of Frank's violent spells. A black notebook. And a flash drive. The notebook had dates, copies of every threatening text, notes from hospital visits I had to lie about. The flash drive? It held voice recordings. Kyle yelling. Frank threatening. Proof. Years of it. I'd forgotten I kept it. And suddenly, the shame twisted into something else. Something sharper. They thought I was too old to fight. Too weak to matter. But a woman who's been through hell doesn't fear the fire. She becomes it. I didn't sleep that night. You can't sleep after something like that, not when your body throbs and your mouth tastes like iron and dirt. And definitely not when your own son walks past the pantry you're locked in, humming like it's just another Tuesday. The next morning, the door creaked open. Not out of mercy. Kyle had to let me out because they needed me to cook breakfast. "You burn the eggs again," he muttered, And I swear, you'll wish you never got out." He said it like it was a favor. I shuffled past him into the kitchen, trying not to limp. My body was a canvas of purple welts and yellowing bruises, and still I was expected to flip bacon and wipe down counters like it was 1986, and I was still trying to earn their love. Kyle scrolled on his phone. Frank sat in his recliner in the living room, TV blasting a game show he couldn't name. He didn't even look at me. He just shouted, "Don't forget the toast this time. And none of that dry crap, real butter, Helen." I was a nurse for 31 years. I held dying hands. I cleaned infected wounds. I taught young mothers how to swaddle babies. I knew how to break a fever without a doctor. And now I was taking breakfast orders from the two men who had destroyed my life. When I went to grab the mail from the front porch, because I still handled the bills, even if I wasn't allowed to pay them, I noticed something. The name on the mailbox, Foster, had been covered with duct tape, replaced by a crooked black label, Kyle and Frank. I stood there in my robe, shaking, envelope in hand, staring at the nameplate like it was a gravestone. Like I had died and no one bothered to tell me. But something else in the pile caught my eye, a letter addressed to me. From a bank I didn't recognize. It was opened. Sloppily. Torn on the side like a raccoon had gotten to it. I slipped it into my robe pocket when Kyle wasn't looking. And when I was finally alone in the bathroom, door locked, I read it over the sink. It was a denial letter. Loan request, denied. Reason, unverifiable income. Insufficient equity. Loan? I hadn't applied for anything, but there it was in my name. The amount, $38,000. And suddenly it clicked. Frank and Kyle weren't just bleeding me dry. They were trying to sell the house. The house I paid for. The house with the attic I hadn't entered in over a decade. The attic that still had my mother's old documents, the last legal proof that this house belonged to me. They had tried to take a loan against the property, but without my signature, it didn't go through. I wasn't just a burden to them, I was an obstacle. That's when I understood why Kyle had started checking my phone, why Frank changed the Wi-Fi password and refused to tell me, why I wasn't allowed to walk to the library anymore. They were isolating me, preparing me. For what? I don't think even they knew. But I did. That night, while they slept drunk and full on the couch, I crept barefoot up the stairs to the attic door. It stuck a little, it always had. But I used my weight and the rusted hinge gave with a moan. The air was thick with dust and memory. Cobwebs hung like curtains in every corner. I hadn't been up there since the winter I lost my sister to cancer. And now, as I stepped onto the warped floorboards, I felt a strange sense of calm. Because it was all still there. The box labeled Helen's deeds. The suitcase full of tax returns. The hospital records. The notarized letters. And at the bottom, an old, battered cassette recorder. I didn't know if it still worked. But I knew what was on it. Frank's voice. Drunk. Threatening me. Telling me to sign it or I'll make you regret ever getting that nursing license. I'd recorded it the night he threatened to push me down the stairs in 2009. I never turned it in. I was too ashamed. Too afraid it would ruin Kyle's childhood if Daddy went to jail. But now I saw it for what it really was. Evidence. Power. A lever. They thought I was just an old woman in a robe. That I was beaten and broken. But they forgot the attic. And what lives in an attic can fall, yes, but it can also rise. When you stop reacting to pain, they find new ways to hurt you. It's not enough for men like Frank to bruise skin. They want to rot the inside of you. They want to break your memories. It was a Wednesday morning when the power was shut off. No warning. No argument. Just silence. Then darkness. No fridge hum. No heat. Just me standing in the kitchen, holding a cracked mug and a heart that was learning to beat quieter. Kyle came down the stairs shirtless, grinning. Oops. Forgot to pay the electric. Guess we're going old school, for a bit. He wasn't forgetting anything. I'd seen the past due notice weeks ago, hidden behind the vodka bottles in the pantry. Frank didn't say a word. He just sat there in his recliner, flipping a cigarette lighter open and closed, eyes glossy and distant. I didn't ask questions anymore. I just started boiling water for sponge baths and lighting candles in corners they never looked at. It was my house too once, but now I was just another shadow in it. The house didn't even creak the same. That evening, I found something on the dining table. A photo of her. Emily, my daughter. Dead now 6 years. Suicide, they said. She'd been living in Oregon. We hadn't spoken in 3 years before she died. Frank made sure of that. Told me she didn't want me. Told her I was bitter, toxic, manipulative. That I'd always poisoned the house. He'd fed her lies for years, until she believed silence was safer than calling home. I still remember the sound of her voice on the answering machine that last time. Mama, I just can't keep doing this. Every time I talk to you, Dad starts yelling and I get so. I'm sorry. I love you. And that was it. Frank put the photo on the table on purpose. I knew at the moment I saw it. It wasn't random. It was staged. Because next to it, in Kyle's scrawl, were the words, "She died because of you." My knees nearly gave out. The room spun like a carousel. Frank didn't even look up. Maybe if you hadn't made her soft, he said, voice like vinegar in a wound. She might have handled the world better. Instead, you coddled her. Made her weak. Just like you. That was his real game. Break my bones if you want to, but twist the knife deep enough to touch my daughter? That's a cruelty you don't come back from. But I didn't cry. Not that night. Because I realized something. If they were reaching for Emily, they were desperate. Desperate men are sloppy. And sloppy men don't notice when an old woman listens more than she speaks. Later that week, Kyle left his laptop open. Just for a moment. He never thought I'd touch it. But I had watched him enough to memorize his password for 1976, the year Frank got his first car. Of course. Inside the browser, email threads, bank statements, a chat with a woman named Danica. Young, blonde, pregnant. He'd promised her money. Said his mom was selling a property soon. Promised to move out west and start fresh. He had no idea I'd seen it. That I had printed it. That it was hidden in the attic next to the deed. But I didn't confront him. I congratulated him. I made him scrambled eggs that morning and said, "You'll be a good father, Kyle. Maybe better than yours." He looked at me like I'd swallowed a nail. "How do you?" "I have ears." "And you talk loud," I said, sipping my tea. "She's pretty. She'll want stability." "You've got a plan, right?" That night, he didn't sleep. He paced the hall like a nervous dog. Frank was confused for days, couldn't figure out why Kyle was snapping at him now. Couldn't tell why his son, his golden boy, was unraveling. But I knew. Because shame, when planted right, grows like ivy, choking everything it touches. They thought I was breaking. But really, I was just planting. And soon, the roots would crack the whole damn house. Some people think the worst kind of pain is physical. No, it's the silence after betrayal, the kind that screams through your chest when you realize someone you once fed with your own hands has erased you with theirs. It was a rainy afternoon when I went back to the attic. Rain always made the house feel smaller, like it was folding in on itself. Kyle was out. Frank had passed out after shouting at a rerun for 2 hours. I tiptoed past the creaking hallway board and slipped back into the dust and would rot of my sanctuary. I brought a flashlight this time. Not because I was afraid of the dark, but because I was looking for something specific. And I found it. An old folder. Water-stained. Stuffed behind a box of my mother's linens. Inside, there were bank documents, ones I hadn't seen since 2011. It was a joint account. One I had set up for house emergencies. But the balance was empty. Negative, in fact. Overdraft. And there it was. Withdrawal after withdrawal, none of them mine. All signed, H. Foster. Except it wasn't my signature. It was a forged, ugly scrawl. Unsteady. Kyle's attempt to imitate my handwriting. They'd been draining me dry for years. Vacations I never went on. Home improvements that never happened. That fancy gaming chair Kyle used while yelling at strangers online for hours? Bought in my name. Frank's leather jacket? Mine. The meat smoker he never learned to use? Mine. And the worst part? I once thought I was going crazy. I thought I was losing receipts. Forgetting purchases. I told myself I was just getting old. But I wasn't. I was being stolen from. Systematically. Strategically. Cruelly. I sat in the attic, shaking, whispering to myself like a prayer, "You're not crazy. You never were. You never were." And then I saw it. At the bottom of the folder was something else, something yellowed and horrifying. A death benefit claim. Dated 5 years ago. Filed under my name. Helen Foster. Deceased. Filed by Frank. The bastard had tried to declare me dead to the bank. No wonder the hospital refused to schedule my surgery last year. No wonder my Medicare card kept getting denied. They were working off old records. He had submitted an obituary fake. Claimed I'd died in a house fire. Attached a forged death certificate. He'd done it to apply for an early payout on my life insurance. My own husband put me in a casket on paper, and the world believed him. I dropped the folder and threw up into a dustbin. My whole body went cold, like someone had just walked over my grave, and maybe they had. That night, I didn't sleep. But I smiled, because now I had everything. Proof of theft, forgery, insurance fraud, elder abuse, and I was going to use it. Every last piece. But I wasn't going to the police. Not yet. Because revenge, my dear viewer, tastes better when it's served slow, when it eats away at the person just the way they did to you, bit by bloody bit. So I started small. The next morning, I told Kyle that Frank was hiding money. I said it offhandedly while slicing apples. "You know he's still got a stash, right?" I said. "He thinks I don't know." But I found a check stub in his coat. 10 grand. Kyle froze mid-bite. "What?" "Don't worry," I added, smiling just enough to sting. "I know he wouldn't share it. Not even with you." He didn't say anything, but later that night, I heard yelling. I heard fists on walls. "You said we were broke, old man," Kyle shouted. Frank stormed into my room 5 minutes later. "What the hell did you tell him?" I just looked up from my Bible and said, "Funny how he believes me now, isn't it?" He slapped the lamp off my nightstand. But he didn't slap me. Because for the first time in years, he was afraid. Afraid I knew something. Afraid the lies were coming apart. And he was right. You ever try to prove you're still alive? It's harder than it sounds. Go ahead, walk into a bank and tell them, "I'm not dead." They'll smile and ask for your ID. But when your file's marked deceased, they don't look at you. They look through you. Like you're a ghost trying to lie your way into the world of the living. And maybe that's what I was. A ghost in her own house. A ghost in her own body. The week after I found the fake death claim, I tried calling my credit union. I wanted to lock down anything they could still reach, accounts, savings, the deed, all of it. But the woman on the other end said calmly, "Ma'am, according to our system, Helen Foster is listed as deceased. If you're claiming to be her, you will need to visit a regional office with a court-certified affidavit of identity and a government-issued photo ID." "But I am her," I whispered. "I understand, but this account has been flagged. We can't proceed until we verify through legal channels." My hands trembled as I hung up. Frank hadn't just forged a claim. He'd buried me in paper. And now I needed to fight for the right to exist. That night, I made them both steak. Medium rare. Garlic butter. Even lit a candle. "What's this?" Frank asked, suspicious. I smiled. Celebrating life. He laughed. "Didn't know you were so sentimental." They didn't know I'd laced the potatoes with a harmless, but deeply uncomfortable, diuretic. Just enough to keep both men running to the bathroom all night. It gave me 3 full hours. That's all I needed. I snuck into Kyle's room. I knew he'd changed his laptop password, but I wasn't after the computer this time. I was after the drawer he thought I didn't know about, the one under the bed, duct taped shut. Inside was a burner phone. And taped to the back was a sticky note. Danica, work #/lawyer stuff. Lawyer. I snapped a photo of everything, contacts, call logs, messages. The burner phone held chats with a man named Tom R., apparently a loan advisor. Turns out Kyle and Frank weren't just trying to sell the house. They were trying to remortgage it under Kyle's name, using forged documents and my identity as collateral. They planned to wait until I passed, which, legally, had already been arranged, then disappear with the cash. Danica, the pregnant girlfriend, was in on it. Once the wire hits, Kyle had texted, "We're out of this dump. She won't even know we're gone." Except now. I did. I backed up every message to a USB drive I'd bought 5 years ago for Christmas photos. Wiped it clean. Loaded it with every bit of dirt they had buried me under. It was almost poetic in a way. They took my life. Now I was taking theirs. But first, I needed my name back. I waited for a day they were both out. I called in a favor from an old friend, Cynthia, who I hadn't spoken to in years. Another nurse. One who owed me more than a few late-night shift covers. "I need an affidavit," I said. "And someone to swear I'm not dead." Her silence was long. Then, "Helen. Jesus. What the hell have they done to you?" I couldn't say the truth out loud. It still tasted like ash. She drove 2 hours to meet me. We signed the papers behind the Dollar Tree, in her car, using a nursing license she still had on file for me as backup. That afternoon, I mailed the entire packet to the state records office, registered, certified, notarized. And then I waited. Waited to be reborn, officially. Waited to show up on paper again. But while I waited, Frank grew darker. He started leaving doors unlocked on purpose. Said things like, "Don't forget to shut the basement. Wouldn't want you falling down the stairs." He switched from yelling to whispering. Cold, controlled whispers. "I could still make it true, he said one night, walking past me in the hallway. "You already tried," I said. He froze. I didn't look at him. I just kept walking. Because you don't have to scream to win. Sometimes, you just need the other person to start doubting what's real and what you're willing to do next. And Frank? He'd built an entire world where I was too weak, too afraid, too old. He forgot what happens when someone has nothing left to lose. Funny thing about abusers, they start falling apart the moment they sense you're no longer afraid. It was a Tuesday. The kind of cold that sets in early and never really leaves your bones. I was folding towels when the knock came, 3 loud pounds on the front door. Kyle jumped like a gun went off. Frank dropped his fork, the clatter loud against chipped ceramic. Who the hell is that? I knew who it was. And I knew what they would think it was. I timed it perfectly, called a welfare check on myself from a payphone 4 blocks away that morning under an alias. Just to see what they'd do. Just to watch them sweat. Frank shuffled to the door like an animal caught in a trap. "Don't say a damn word," he hissed at me, wiping mashed potatoes from his shirt. He opened it to find a city code officer, not the cops. "Not this time. Got a complaint about a possible gas leak from this unit," the officer said, clipboard in hand. "Mind if I take a look around?" Kyle appeared behind Frank, pale as milk. I stood in the hallway, holding my towel. Calm. Silent. Frank tried to argue, but Kyle cut him off. "Sure," he said. "Come in." He was shaking. Why? Because his hands weren't clean and his conscience knew it. The officer walked through the kitchen, paused near the stove, turned the knobs. Nothing out of the ordinary. But Kyle hovered the whole time, twitchy, breathing hard. The officer glanced at me. "Ma'am," he said gently. "Everything okay here?" And that's when I did it. I blinked once. Let my lip tremble. Let my fingers drop the towel to the floor. Just enough. He caught it. Frank noticed too. His face darkened, but he didn't move. I looked up at the officer, eyes wide. "Yes," I said softly. "Everything's just fine." That was all. But when the officer left, Frank didn't speak to me for 3 hours. Kyle didn't sleep at all. Because now, they didn't know what I'd done. Or what I might do next. That night, Kyle went to the attic. He didn't think I saw him. But I watched through the vent as he ripped open old boxes, digging through papers, shoving things into a trash bag, sweating like he was digging up a body. He found the empty folder. The one that used to hold the forged bank documents. Gone. Because I moved them 2 weeks ago. Now they were locked in a safety deposit box under my name. My real name, freshly restored by the state 2 days earlier. I had a new driver's license, a new Medicare card, a notarized affidavit of life. And most importantly, I had my voice again. But I wasn't ready to scream. Not yet. I needed them to keep doubting, keep scrambling, keep unraveling each other. So the next day, I said casually at breakfast, I saw someone watching the house last night. Frank's fork stopped midair. Black car. Same one that drove by last week. Kyle dropped his coffee mug. I didn't blink. You think they're from the bank? I asked. Nobody answered. Because they were already filling in the blanks themselves. That night, I heard them fighting. Why would you keep the papers upstairs, you moron? Kyle hissed. You said it was handled. She was dead on paper. How was I supposed to know she'd come back? She knows, Dad. She's playing us. She's got nothing. She's a half-dead old witch. She can't even drive. But they were wrong. I could drive. And I had. Down to the courthouse, where I filed a restraining order application. Not just for abuse, but for identity theft, fraud, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. The clerk didn't bat an eye. You'd be surprised how common this is, she said softly, handing me a copy. You're not alone, ma'am. I almost cried. But I didn't. I waited. Waited until I was strong enough. Because the next knock they hear won't be a welfare check. It'll be the law. With my name on the documents this time. Not Frank's. Not Kyle's. Mine. You know what humiliation is? It's standing in a grocery line with canned soup and cotton underwear in your cart, while your grown son loudly tells the cashier she's not all there. Mentally, she's got episodes. Thinks people are stealing from her. He said it loud enough for the teenage girl behind the register to blink in pity. I stood there silent, letting the receipt print. But I was screaming inside. Because he knew. Kyle knew I'd been to the courthouse. Knew I'd talked to someone. Knew I'd started fighting back. So he retaliated where he knew it would hurt, in public with strangers. But what he didn't know was that I'd already placed the recording device in my purse. It was voice-activated, tiny, tucked in an old tube of lipstick. It caught every word, every gaslighting phrase, every she's losing it smear. Every time he laughed and said, she thinks we forged her name. She thinks I killed her on paper. The next day, I uploaded that recording to a secure online drive under an anonymous username. Shared with a lawyer I found through Cynthia, a woman named April Grant, who specialized in elder abuse and identity reclamation. April called me back 12 hours later. I've been doing this work for 17 years, she said. This is one of the worst cases I've heard. I didn't cry. I smiled. Because finally, someone believed me without needing to see my bruises. She told me to stay calm. Keep collecting. Keep watching. And when the moment came, we'd file everything at once, a civil suit, a criminal report, a media release if needed. But I didn't wait to be rescued. No, I gave Kyle one more string to trip on. I casually left a piece of mail open on the table, something from a funeral home. An old catalog of services I found in my closet. I placed it so he'd see my name on it, as a prepaid plan holder. He found it, and he snapped. You planning your next fake funeral, old hag, he barked, grabbing the letter and waving it in my face. Frank walked in right then. Would you shut up? Frank growled. You're making it worse. That's when Kyle lost it. Don't tell me to shut up. You're the one who said she was done for. You're the one who told me we had $5,000 coming in from that policy. Frank stepped forward. I told you to keep your mouth shut. And then he shoved Kyle. Hard. Kyle slipped, hit the floor with a crack. I didn't flinch, because the tape recorder in my purse was running again. And this time, it caught violence. But the real gift? Kyle turned his rage on Frank. You used me, he shouted. You said this house would be mine. You said she'd be gone by now. Frank didn't deny it. Didn't say, she's your mother. Didn't say, that's not true. He just snarled, you can't even handle a simple plan without screwing it up. That was it. The line. Kyle picked up a lamp and threw it. It shattered against the wall. I waited until midnight. Packed a duffel. Walked 3 blocks in the dark to a women's shelter that April recommended. Told the woman at the desk my name. My real name. She said gently, you're safe here. I didn't even remember falling asleep. But the next morning, April called with news. The restraining order was approved. The lawsuit was ready. And the best part? A judge had frozen the house deed pending an investigation. Which meant Frank and Kyle couldn't sell it. Couldn't touch it. Couldn't even open a line of credit under it. I had just cut off their last lifeline. And I wasn't done yet. Because now, I was going to take their dignity. The way they had taken mine. You can destroy a man without ever raising your voice. And you don't need fire. Just truth and time. The morning after I left, I didn't go straight to April's office. I took the long way through town, past places I used to matter. The clinic where I worked 27 years, the library I volunteered at, even the coffee shop where Frank once proposed to me. I saw 2 women I knew from church, Gloria and Maria, walking toward me on the sidewalk. They saw me too. And they looked away. Like seeing me alive was a scandal. Like I was already supposed to be gone. Frank's lies had grown roots. But I wasn't just going to dig them up, I was going to burn the whole tree. I met with April and handed her the latest recording. Kyle threatening Frank. Frank admitting the fraud. Their entire filthy conspiracy laid bare. She looked me in the eye and said, Helen, this is going to make waves. I told her I wanted a flood. The next step was public. She filed a formal petition for injunctive relief against both men and then sent a tip to the local paper's online whistleblower site anonymously. A headline popped up 3 days later. Woman declared dead by own family fights back with lawsuit. Identity theft claims my name wasn't in it. Yet, but the town was buzzing. Frank came into that same coffee shop 2 days later and found the barista, Rita, whose baby shower I once hosted, wouldn't look him in the eye. I know because she called me. He looks like he's being eaten from the inside out, she said. I smiled. And then came the shed. I remembered something Frank had said once, years ago, when I'd asked about locking the shed door. Some things are better left sealed. After everything I had to know. I returned to the house while they were out, escorted by the sheriff's deputy, per my new protective order. The deputy stood watch as I pried open the rusted lock. Inside, buried under rotting tools and water-damaged tarps, was a plastic storage bin marked storage, Helen. Inside were items I hadn't seen in over a decade. My original Social Security card, my nursing credentials and license, 2 expired passports, wedding photos with my face scratched out, my mother's will, and beneath it all, something worse. A folder labeled Danica, Final Options. Inside was a signed notarized document, a custody relinquishment form. For Danica's unborn baby. Signed by Kyle. But not in his own name. In mine. He'd forged a legal custody transfer. To make it look like I had claimed rights to Danica's child, then abandoned them. Why? Because Danica's baby wasn't his. It was Frank's. The dates matched. The prenatal paperwork. The hidden paternity request, folded in the back of the folder. Danica had never been Kyle's girlfriend. She'd been Frank's mistress. Pregnant by him. Living in my house. Calling me mom with smug eyes while my husband played both father and grandfather to a child that was never mine. I stared at that form for 5 full minutes. Then I folded it, took photos, and walked out of that shed without a single word. Some truths are so vile you don't even need to speak them. You just use them. April's face turned pale when she saw the papers. This is enough, she said. We can go criminal. This is child welfare fraud, federal identity fraud, elder exploitation, and conspiracy to falsify legal documents. I told her we would. But not yet. Because people like Frank and Kyle, they don't just deserve jail. They deserve to be begged to be locked up. And that starts with one thing: shame. They say shame is a private thing. That's a lie. Real shame happens when someone else sees it and doesn't flinch. 3 days after I found the forged custody form, I mailed 50 anonymous envelopes across the town. Inside each one, photocopies of the paternity test results, the fake custody papers, and a brief letter typed in courier font. This man betrayed his wife, lied about his son, and falsified documents to cover it. He lives among you. Act accordingly. I sent them to the church where Frank still shook hands on Sundays, the local gun club where Kyle liked to brag about his protection instincts, the community board at the grocery store, and to every neighbor on our block. Even the ones who waved politely while I bruised, I signed them with one sentence: she's not dead. She's watching. That same weekend was the church potluck. I didn't go, of course. But my friend Diane did. She sat near the piano like she always does, folding napkins. She called me afterward, her voice breathless. He stormed in like a man possessed, she said. Tore your photo off the memorial wall, spit on it. Started shouting that you were a liar, that you faked everything. And what did the pastor say? I asked. He told him. Then why is she standing right outside? I wasn't. But Frank didn't know that. He ran out of the church like it was on fire. Humiliated, sweating, furious. He was unraveling. Exactly as I planned. Kyle, meanwhile, started spiraling in a different direction. He showed up at Cynthia's house, drunk, banging on the door, screaming that he was being watched, saying his phone was bugged, begging her to tell him where I was. She didn't let him in. She called April instead. April called me, and I gave her the go-ahead. Leak the photos, I said. Everything but the baby's identity. Let the town see who they are. She posted a blog article through her legal advocacy page titled, "When Abusers Fake Deaths, The Untold Case of Helen F." It went viral locally. Comments flooded in. People posted things like, "I remember seeing her at the pharmacy with bruises. I thought it was just age. That man told us she died of cancer. I saw the girl, Danica, walking around pregnant, calling her mom." We all thought it was strange. But the final blow that week? That came from Danica herself. She called me. Blocked number. Voice shaky. "You ruined everything," she hissed. Frank stopped sending money. People at work won't look me in the eye. What do you want from me? I didn't raise my voice. I want the truth, I said. She stayed silent. I continued, "Tell me who put you up to forging my name. Was it Kyle? Or Frank?" More silence. Then a whisper, "It was both." "And the baby?" I asked. "Where is he now?" Another pause. Then, finally, "Gone." She hung up. I stared at the phone in my hand. Gone. Was it adoption? Was it something worse? My stomach twisted. But I couldn't chase that pain yet. Not when my war wasn't finished. So I called the title office next. Asked for a full transaction history on the house. There, in black and white, was the final betrayal. 2 months before they declared me dead, Frank had filed paperwork to sell the house, in Kyle's name. Not mine. Not even his. Kyle's. They were going to erase me entirely. And they almost did. But now? Every paper trail led back to them. And every time someone looked them in the eye from now on, they would see me. Alive. Unforgiving. And growing more dangerous by the day. I wore red on purpose. Bright red. Blood red. The kind of red that can't be ignored. A red coat I'd sewn myself back in '84 when Frank still brought me flowers and Kyle still kissed my cheek before school. I wore it like armor. Because this time, I wasn't knocking on my front door. I was walking through it, escorted by law enforcement, court order in hand, keys reissued in my name. The officer was young. He looked nervous. "Are you sure you want to be here for this?" he asked. I smiled and said, "It's the only place I belong." When we stepped inside, the smell hit first. Sweat. Cheap beer. Mold from a leaking pipe I once warned them about. Then I saw them, Frank and Kyle, sitting on the couch, unshaven and silent like children caught playing with matches. Frank looked thinner. His belly sagged like wet laundry. His face was blotchy. He didn't recognize me at first. Kyle stared like I was a ghost. He actually whispered it. "You're not real." "I'm real," I said, stepping forward. "You made sure of that when you signed your names under mine." The officer cleared his throat and read the court order aloud. Temporary reinstatement of residency and financial authority. Plaintiff, Helen F. Frank scoffed. "This is our house." "My house," I corrected. "And the judge agrees." Kyle stood up suddenly, his face purple with rage. "You can't do this. You faked your death. You're mentally unstable." The officer stepped between us. "Sir, one more outburst, and I'll remove you from the premises." Frank stayed sitting, his hands clenched in fists. But his mouth trembled. I walked past them both and ran my fingers along the banister. The very wood where Kyle had tied me with rope. I kept walking, slowly, letting them feel each footstep. Then I turned to them and said, "You remember the attic?" Frank's mouth opened slightly. Kyle paled. "That's where I'm moving in," I said. "You two like pretending I was dead." "Fine. Now you can live with my ghost." The officer smirked just barely. He left soon after. Said to call if I felt threatened. I said I'd make sure they felt threatened first. For the next hour, the house was dead silent. I made tea, sat at the kitchen table, and I waited. Eventually, Frank slumped in and sat across from me. He didn't speak for a full minute. Then he looked at me with watery eyes and said, "I was going to fix everything." I laughed once, short and cruel. Fix it? By erasing me from every document? By beating me until my own son started helping? His lip quivered. "You weren't supposed to remember it all." "You tied me to a chair," I whispered. Kyle held me down. "You whipped me until I bled through my nightgown." "You don't come back from that." Tears rolled down his cheeks. He put his hand on the table, as if reaching for mine. I didn't move. "I don't want to die alone," he choked. "Then you should have let me live," I said. He stood and left the room. I didn't cry. Instead, I opened the drawer where they'd hidden the forged power of attorney papers. I added a new document inside it. A will. My real one. It left nothing to Kyle. Nothing to Frank. Every penny, every brick, every heirloom, going to survivors of domestic abuse over 60. A fund I was building now with April's help. The house would become a refuge. The attic? A healing space. The basement? A therapy room. The living room? A courtroom of memory. And as for Frank and Kyle, they could rot in the same shadows they tried to bury me in. Because I was back. And I wasn't just here to haunt them. I was here to end them. I walked into the county courthouse with my hair pinned up, my coat pressed, and a file under my arm thicker than a preacher's Bible. April met me at the door. "You ready?" she asked. I've been ready for 12 years. The hearing was set for 9 a.m. The courtroom was small, wood-paneled, too warm. A bailiff stood stiff by the entrance like he was guarding royalty. Frank and Kyle arrived late. Disheveled. Frank's shirt was half-tucked. Kyle's hands were shaking. No lawyer. Just them and their sins. When the judge looked at them, I swear the whole room tilted. April began. She laid it out piece by piece. The false declaration of death, the forged power of attorney, the reallocation of property and bank accounts, the paternity fraud, the physical abuse, the psychological abuse, the financial exploitation of a senior citizen. The judge's eyebrows rose more than once. Then she handed over the folder labeled Attic Evidence, photos of the bruises. Audio clips of Frank muttering about tying me to the chair. Screenshots of Kyle mocking my memory lapses and texts to Danica. Frank never looked up. Kyle muttered, "She's making it up." April raised her voice. "Then why is your voice on the recording saying, 'Just do it'? Dad, she'll black out like last time." Silence. Frank started to weep. The judge called for recess. I stepped outside to the lobby, leaned against the cold marble wall, and exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. That's when I heard it. Kyle. On his phone. His voice just around the corner. "She's bluffing. We move the money now, before the injunction's permanent." "I still have access. No, don't hang up. Mom's gonna ruin everything. We need to dump the stocks. Hello." I stepped around the corner slowly. He saw me. And, for the first time in my life, I saw terror in my son's face. I didn't say a word. I simply raised my phone and tapped stop recording. He lunged for me. I stepped back just as the bailiff grabbed him. Handcuffed him right there in the hallway, in front of the vending machines and the receptionist and the man with the limp waiting for his traffic hearing. Kyle screamed, "You set me up." "No," I said. "You did this. When you decided it was easier to betray your mother than love her." He spat on the floor as they dragged him out. Frank didn't say a word when he was told the court was placing a freeze on all joint accounts, that I had the right to live in the home, that all ownership transfers were void pending full investigation, and that criminal charges were under review. He just stood up, stumbled a bit, and as I walked past him, he whispered, "We're family." I paused. "Family doesn't need handcuffs, Frank." And I kept walking. That night, I sat alone in the attic. Candles lit. The window cracked open. I could smell the lilacs blooming again, the ones I planted the spring after Kyle was born. And I thought about truth. How it doesn't save you. It scars you. But it's still the only thing that can end a lie. I hadn't won. Not yet. But the foundation they built over my bones? It was crumbling. And next, I would make sure the collapse was public, permanent, and poetic. 3 weeks after the courthouse hearing, my story was everywhere. April's advocacy site crashed twice. Local news did a 5-minute piece calling me the widow who wasn't. One reporter from a national women's magazine emailed me, directly asking for an exclusive. And I still didn't feel free. The house was quiet, too quiet. Frank had left, slinking off to a motel that only charged weekly. Kyle was held pending formal charges, fraud, financial abuse, and assault. But I still jumped at creeks. Still kept a hammer beside the attic door. I was folding laundry when the doorbell rang. The knock was soft, almost polite. I walked down slowly. My knees ached. My spine throbbed. Trauma doesn't leave the bones so easily. When I opened the door, I nearly dropped my glass. She was maybe in her late 30s. Slim, pale, long auburn hair tied back in a braid. And around her neck? My grandmother's gold necklace. The one that went missing the night Frank told me I'd imagined the fire alarm going off. The same week I got locked out of our safe. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice already cold. She smiled nervously. "You don't know me." My name's Allison." I think I was your husband's caretaker." "Caretaker?" Her eyes shifted down. "I mean, we were involved. On and off. For years." Of course. I didn't speak. I just stepped aside and let her in. She looked around like she was stepping into a crime scene. Which, to be fair, she was. "I don't want money," she said quickly. "I swear. I didn't know how bad it got until the articles came out. I thought you were dead." That's what he told me. That you had dementia and died during a seizure in the tub. My jaw clenched. Allison sat gently on the couch, crossing her legs. "I was 19 when I met him. He said he was separated. I was dumb." "You weren't dumb," I said. "You were targeted." She swallowed hard. "I got pregnant. Years ago. He told me he'd take care of everything. I had the baby. A boy." I blinked. She continued, "I gave him up. But Frank said he'd make sure he had a good life. that he'd handle it privately. No records. My stomach dropped. What year? I asked, my voice shaking. 2009. Danika's baby. But Danika wasn't the mother. She was the incubator. That poor girl. They'd used her to hide the origin, to keep it in the family, to erase Allison. Frank had taken his own illegitimate son, forced the pregnancy into the arms of a teenage runaway, and then beat the only woman who might remember the truth. I sat down hard. You didn't know? She asked. No, I said. But I do now. She opened her purse and pulled out something small. A birth certificate. The father? Francis R. F. The mother? Allison M. W. Baby name, Micah. Status, adopted confidential. Why are you really here? I asked. She hesitated. I want to find my son. And you think I can help you? She nodded. I think we've both been used. Lied to. Hurt. I read what your son did to you. I believe you. And if there's anyone who understands what it's like to be erased, it's you. I took the birth certificate, looked at it long and hard, then said, if I help you find him, we do it my way. No forgiveness. No softness. No lies. She nodded. And for the first time in over a decade, I had a partner. Not a savior. Not a lawyer. A witness. And together, we were going to dig up every secret Frank ever buried until the dead finally got to speak. Allison and I became partners overnight. Not friends. Not exactly. More like two women haunted by the same man, walking the same minefield barefoot, hoping we'd find the wire before it blew our legs off. I didn't ask why she kept the necklace all those years. I knew why. Survivors keep tokens, even of pain, especially of pain. We started by requesting sealed adoption records under my name, claiming I was a relative trying to reunite with family. April handled the legal red tape. At least, I thought she did. More on that in a moment. We tracked down Micah's last known city, Fort Collins, Colorado. He was in the foster system until age 3. After that, nothing. The trail vanished. Wiped. We started reaching out to private investigators. Most wanted money up front. One asked me if I was ready to handle what you find. I told him I've handled worse. My ribs still crack every winter. Allison stayed in my guest room, Frank's old office. She slept with the light on. One night, I heard her whispering through the vent. Micah, baby, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I'm sorry. And I knew this wasn't about revenge for her. It was atonement. April came over the next day to drop off paperwork. I noticed something odd. A folded envelope in her bag, addressed to Frank. I didn't say anything. Not yet. I let her leave. Then I checked the security camera. She had stopped at his motel on the way over. Twice this week. And on my porch the day before, she'd used words I didn't teach her. Words like reframe the narrative and public sympathy. Something cracked in me. Not just disappointment. Not just rage. Betrayal. I waited until midnight. Then I went into April's digital files, the shared folder she set up for my case. And I found it. A recording. A phone call. Date. 2 weeks ago. April's voice. She's spiraling. Frank. I don't know how much longer I can control the damage. Maybe if you apologized on camera, say it was elder abuse under stress, we could pivot public opinion. Frank. What do you want, April? April. A percentage of whatever settlement comes your way. This kind of press, it's got potential. She was negotiating with my abuser, bartering my blood. I don't remember standing up. I just remember the cold, the kind that starts in your stomach and works its way into your bones like a curse. I sent her a text, your keys don't work anymore. The next time you come here, bring a lawyer. And then I emailed the recording to the same reporter who'd asked for my story. Subject line. The advocate's real face. Let the world see. Let the truth burn everyone down, not just me. I told Allison everything. She didn't cry, just nodded. You can't trust anyone, she said. And I answered, not unless they've bled for it. We printed every document, every receipt, every date. And then we found something. An adoption code number, handwritten on a form Frank had scribbled over. It wasn't part of the official record. We traced it through a private adoption clinic that shut down in 2014. One of the last placements? Micah, male, mixed heritage, placed with a military couple in Virginia. We had a location. A real one. But before we could act, my phone lit up. Unknown number. I answered. A man's voice. Young, hesitant, shaky. Is this Helen F? Yes, I said, heart pounding. I think you're my grandmother. His name was Micah Harper now. 21. 6'1". Quiet voice, like he was always trying not to wake something sleeping nearby. We met at a diner outside Richmond. It was raining hard. The kind of rain that feels like penance. Allison sat beside me, fidgeting with her cup. I told her to let me lead. Micah walked in wearing a gray hoodie, jeans, and old sneakers. His eyes were warm and guarded all at once. Hi, he said. You're Helen. I stood, nodded, then hesitated. I didn't know if I was supposed to hug him, or bow, or collapse. Instead, I offered my hand. He shook it. His hands were calloused. A working man's hands. Saturday, I don't really know what to say, he said. My adoptive parents told me I came from a troubled background. Said my mother was unstable. Allison flinched. They said my biological grandmother died before I was born. That there were safety concerns. I felt something unravel in my chest. You've been lied to your whole life, I said softly. He nodded, eyes flicking to Allison. I did some digging after I found that envelope in the attic, he said. What envelope? I asked. My dad passed away 2 months ago. Cancer. In the attic, I found a box marked Frank. It had letters, photos, a newspaper clipping about your case. It didn't make sense. Then I found the number you posted. So that's how he found me. Not a miracle. A mistake Frank buried in someone else's attic. Do you know who I am to you? I asked. He nodded. You're my grandmother. And she's my mother. He didn't look at Allison when he said it. She tried to speak, but I stopped her with a hand. What else did your adoptive parents say? I asked. He sighed. That you were mentally unwell. That you abused your son. That my bio-mom was sold. Allison gasped. Sold? That's the word they used, he said. Sold to a private family to carry out a favor. They made it sound like some dark fairy tale. I didn't believe it until I saw your court case. His eyes locked on mine. I don't know who to trust. I don't blame you, I said. But I want to know, he said. What really happened? So I told him. All of it. The attic. The chair. The belt. The nights I whispered prayers into cracked floorboards. The way Kyle spat in my face. The way Frank left fingerprints on my collarbone that stayed blue for weeks. Allison cried silently beside me. Micah said nothing for a long time. Then finally, I thought I came from nothing. I shook my head. You came from strength. You came from survival. He swallowed hard. I want to meet Kyle. That stopped me. Why? I want to look him in the eye and ask why he tried to erase me. I want to see if he flinches. I nodded. You'll get that chance. But as I paid the check, I felt something in my gut twist again. Micah's voice, his tone, something in it didn't sit right. Not malice, but something colder. Like a man making a list. That night, Allison paced the whole way outside the guest room. He's not okay, she whispered. Helen, he's holding back. Did you see the scars on his wrists? I saw. What do we do? I looked out the window. Rain beating against the glass like fists. We finish this. We expose everyone. Kyle, Frank, that adoption clinic. The whole chain. Allison stepped closer. And then what? Then we give Micah a choice. Healing or revenge. Because some things can be reclaimed. But others? Others have to be burned to ash. They called me when Kyle finally agreed to a visitor. His lawyer said it was out of character, that he hadn't spoken in weeks. Barely ate. Looked like hell. But when I told him his half-brother wanted a word, he smiled. Smiled. Like the devil finally got bored of pacing. We arrived at the county facility that morning. Micah wore black, head to toe. He didn't say much. Allison stayed in the car. She said she couldn't do it, not yet. Inside, the guards frisked him, searched me, and led us down a cold hallway lined with flickering lights. You'd think a place filled with cages would be loud. But it was silent. And somehow that was worse. When we entered the room, Kyle was already seated. He looked up, and that same smug twist spread across his face. Well, he said. Family reunion. Micah sat, folded his hands, said nothing. Kyle stared at him, then laughed softly. You've got his eyes. Whose? Micah asked. Frank's, Kyle said. Not your eyes. His. Same storm underneath. Micah didn't blink. I heard the story, Kyle went on. Poor little attic grandma. Beaten, betrayed, saved by the truth. He leaned forward, smirking. But she left out one piece. My breath caught. Don't, Kyle. He looked at me with a venomous grin. You remember that clinic Frank used to hide the baby? The one with the fake records? I nodded. Kyle turned to Micah. They didn't just hide you. They trained you. What? They placed you with a couple in military intelligence. Not random. Strategic. The adoption was a payment. Those people owed Frank favors. You weren't just erased from our lives, you were groomed. Micah stiffened. I said, stop it, Kyle. You're just trying to poison him like Frank poisoned you. Kyle's eyes gleamed. You know what I found on Micah's sealed file, Mom? He slid something across the table. A printed scan. A psychiatric assessment. Dated 2 years ago. Patient. Micah Harper. Diagnosis. Conduct disorder with emerging psychopathy indicators. Micah stood abruptly. His chair scraped the floor. His face was stone. You done? He asked Kyle. Kyle just laughed. Tick, tock, brother. Let's see how long you play nice before the itch starts. Micah didn't speak. Just walked out. I followed, heart thudding. Outside, in the parking lot, he leaned against the car. His hands were shaking. You knew, he asked quietly. No, not until now. He nodded slowly. What does that mean? That paper? I stepped closer. It means you've been through things no child should. And now you have a choice. He looked at me, eyes suddenly glossy. I don't want to become him. Then don't, I said. He exhaled. But I think I already did something. I froze. What? Micah opened his phone. Played a voicemail. It was from April. Micah, I don't know what you sent those reporters, but they're outside my apartment. I've lost my job. You said you just wanted to talk. Please call me. He looked at me. I reached out to her. Before we met. Pretended I was building a timeline for a book. She told me everything. His voice dropped. I leaked it all. Names. Backroom deals. Frank's offshore accounts. She's ruined. So is the clinic's founder. I didn't tell you because I thought you'd stop me. I didn't know what to say. Micah wasn't a child anymore. He was a weapon. One I may have helped sharpen. You hurt her. I asked finally. No, he said. But I thought about it. That scared me more than anything. I turned, looked out over the empty parking lot. You have to choose, I whispered. Every day. Choose who you'll be. And it doesn't get easier. Especially when your blood wants fire. He looked away. But he nodded. And for the first time, I wasn't sure if I was raising a survivor or creating my replacement. Micah spent the next few weeks buried in Frank's files. Not the sanitized bank statements he handed over in court, the real ones. Hidden inside a mirrored drive labeled backups on an old laptop we'd recovered from the storage unit Frank rented under his mother's maiden name. We took it to a data recovery expert. When he gave it back, he looked pale. "There's stuff on here you don't want to see." He was right. Encrypted folders. Thousands of transactions. And then a spreadsheet named Transit Map 2012 to 2017. I should have shut it then. I didn't. It started with locations, residential homes, mostly. My old address was second on the list. Next to it, drop point, verified. 2 girls, 15 and 17. Picked up, March 14th, 13. Paid, $5K. My breath caught. My knees buckled. "Micah," I whispered. He didn't look up. "The man who raised me," he said flatly. He was one of the financiers. I ran his name through a database. He was flagged under 2 sealed investigations. I covered my mouth. Micah kept scrolling. Most of the locations were empty houses. Some were homes Frank sold fast, flipped. "But your house, your attic," he turned to me. "You ever see anything strange delivered? Furniture you didn't order? Locked crates?" I was shaking. I remember a blue trunk once. Frank said it was old military storage. Told me not to open it, that it had sensitive equipment. I never thought. He nodded. "He trafficked girls," he said, voice like cold steel. "Through your attic. Through you." And I realized it wasn't just bruises he left me with. It was blood. Micah compiled everything. He cross-checked names, dates, amounts. Found emails buried in hidden partitions on the drive. Photos. Logs. Some of the girls were never found. But we now had faces. And receipts. Allison helped us draft the report. A female journalist named Nina Garvey from Chicago took it. She'd been tracking an underground adoption to trafficking pipeline for 7 years. When she saw Frank's files, she went white. "This'll blow a dozen people sky high," she said. Politicians, judges, real estate developers. "But you understand the cost." I looked at her. I lived in that house for 30 years. I scrubbed blood out of my own hair after my husband beat me with a belt he bought with this money. I've paid more than anyone. Micah uploaded everything to 3 secure sites. And we hit publish. It exploded. Front page of Reddit. Then mainstream. Retired wife of financial mogul leaks evidence of trafficking ring. Frank's face was everywhere. So was mine. And then, the first threat arrived. A bullet. In a red velvet box. No note. Just sent to my porch. Micah opened it. "Stay calm," I said. He didn't speak. He just smiled. Not the kind of smile a boy makes when he's scared. The kind men make when they're preparing to go dark. Later that night, I woke up and found him outside, barefoot in the yard, staring at the stars. "What are you thinking?" I asked. He didn't turn around. "Do you think we're made or forged?" he asked. I stepped closer. "What do you mean? Do you think monsters are born or created?" I put a hand on his shoulder. And for the first time, he flinched at my touch. But he didn't pull away. He whispered, "I want to hurt the people who did this." "You did hurt them," I said. "You exposed them." "Not enough." His fists clenched. "If they sent that bullet, they're still out there. Watching. Laughing. Breathing." I said his name. Twice. And then firmly. "You're not him, Micah. You're not Frank. You're not Kyle." He turned. And for a moment, I wasn't sure he believed me. Not entirely. But he said, "Okay." And that night, I locked my door for the first time since Frank left. Not because I was afraid of strangers, but because the boy I raised was no longer a boy. He was a mirror. And I wasn't sure what version of me he was reflecting back. Her name was Sasha Mendez. She was 29 now. And she showed up at my door unannounced, just after dawn. The sky was pink. I was pouring coffee when the doorbell rang. I didn't recognize her at first. But there was something in her eyes, hollow but burning, like the silence before a scream. "Mrs. Alder," she said. I nodded slowly. My fingers clenched around the doorframe. "I'm one of the girls," she said. "One of his girls. I was trafficked through your house when I was 17. The world tilted. I stepped back. She didn't move. I don't want revenge, she said quickly. I want to remember. That was the cruelest part. She couldn't remember most of it. They drugged us, she said, stepping inside as I opened the door with a trembling hand. Sometimes for days. I remember parts. Shapes. The attic stairs. The smell of lemon cleaner. A crucifix on the wall. I swallowed. There was a crucifix, I said softly. She nodded. And the floor creaked. In the back right corner. She wasn't lying. She couldn't be lying. I made her tea. We sat in the living room. She didn't want sugar. She didn't want sympathy. She wanted answers. Why didn't you stop him? I didn't know, I said. You didn't suspect? I suspected 1,000 things, I whispered. But when you're being beaten, gaslit, silenced, you learn to question your sanity before your suspicions. She looked away. Her jaw clenched. I was held here for 3 days. I think. She pulled a photo from her coat. It was a picture of her. Younger. Thinner. Bruised. Taken in my attic. I covered my mouth. I wanted to cry. But she didn't let me. I'm not here for your tears, she said. I'm here because I need help. I met her eyes. And in them, I saw a woman who had crawled through the same fire. I'm listening, I said. There's another girl, she whispered. Her name was Danica. She was taken the same night. I haven't heard from her in years. I think she might still be alive. And I think Frank hit her. Somewhere no one's looking. My stomach turned. What makes you think that? Because I found something in one of the old houses Frank owned. A journal. Pages torn out. Half a name, Hollow Creek. It's not a place I can find online. But I think it's real. Micah came downstairs halfway through. He stood frozen when he saw her. She froze, too. Then said, You're the son, aren't you? Micah nodded. I'm sorry, she said. He flinched. For what? For what your blood carries. He looked away. She turned back to me. I want you to come with me, she said. To find Hollow Creek. To find her. You knew Frank. You knew how he hid things. I need your help. I hesitated. And, for the first time in months, I was afraid again. Micah won't let me go alone, I said. I don't want him, she snapped. He's the only reason we found the files, I countered. She stared at me, then sighed. Fine, but only if he doesn't talk. Micah raised an eyebrow. Deal, he said. And just like that, I was going back into the past. Into the wilderness Frank used to vanish girls. To a place that doesn't exist on maps. Where Danica might be buried. Or worse, still trapped. We drove 6 hours out of state. Micah drove. Sasha sat in the back, staring out the window the whole time like she was watching ghosts walk past. We didn't talk much. Not until we passed the sign for Hollow Creek. But there was no town. No gas station. No houses. Just a crumbling wooden sign off the main road, half covered in ivy. Hollow Creek Baptist Camp, closed since 1999, Sasha pointed. There. We turned down a gravel path, overgrown and split with tree roots. The car groaned as we pushed forward. A deer crossed the road ahead and vanished like it was never there. Then we saw it. A cluster of cabins behind a rusted gate. And one bigger building, an old chapel, covered in moss and ivy, leaning like it was bowing in shame. Micah parked. Killed the engine. We stepped out and the air went still. No birds. No wind. Just silence. Sasha led us toward the largest cabin, the only one with new wood on the door. Recently replaced. I could smell rot and mildew and something else underneath. Something metallic. Sasha reached for the handle. It wasn't locked. She pushed it open. The inside looked like time had folded in on itself. Dust. Old furniture. Mattresses on the floor. A stove with melted plastic on the coils. And then, a sound. A thud. Something moved in the corner. Micah reached for the crowbar he'd brought, inching forward. And then a figure emerged from the shadows. Thin. Barefoot. Dirty. Hair hanging like a curtain over her face. She stopped at the edge of the light. Sasha stepped forward, voice trembling. Danica? The girl looked up. Her face was hollow, pale, eyes like broken glass. She flinched at the sound of her name. Danica, it's me. Sasha, from Red Creek. You remember me? The girl blinked. Then, slowly, nodded. Sasha burst into tears. Micah stood back, watching them like a statue. Danica stepped forward, hand outstretched not to touch Sasha, but to shield her face. Like she still expected to be hit. I swallowed hard and approached slowly. Danica, my name is Helen, I said gently. We're here to take you somewhere safe. Her eyes started around. Then she whispered something. Sasha leaned in. What? Danica repeated it louder. Cameras. We froze. Micah moved, fast, checking the ceiling beams. The corners. Then he found it, a small black box tucked behind a wooden molding. Wireless, he said. Battery powered. He crushed it under his boot. Danica collapsed. Not from fear, from relief. She started sobbing, full body sobs that shook her ribs. Sasha held her, rocking her. I didn't know he still had you, she whispered. Danica mumbled he brought others, but they didn't stay. I was the one who didn't fight. So he left me. Those words stuck with me like a blade to the chest. I was the one who didn't fight. So he left me. Micah searched the rest of the cabin. Found syringes. Empty pill bottles. A rusted chain bolted to the wall under the bed. Sasha looked at me. What do we do? I said, we take her. We take her now. Micah wrapped Danica in his hoodie. Sasha held her in the back seat. As we drove away from Hollow Creek, Danica said something else. There's a box. Under the chapel floor. He said if I ever talked, he'd send it to the sheriff. Micah stopped the car. He looked at me. I'm going back, he said. I knew that look. He was no longer a son. No longer a boy. He was the consequence Frank never expected. I stayed with the girls in the car. He was gone 20 minutes. Came back covered in dust, carrying a metal lockbox. Inside, Polaroids. Dozens of them. Girls. Some unconscious. Some not. Dates. Codes. Timestamps. Micah opened one envelope. Inside, a thumb drive labeled Play This Last. He said nothing, just drove. And I knew the world was about to burn. Because we didn't just find a victim. We found proof. And somewhere, the men who funded this, the men who laughed while girls screamed, were starting to sweat. The thumb drive was real. The faces were real. The timestamps, the pain, the begging, all real. Micah and I sat across from Nina Garvey in her newsroom office as she clicked through the footage. Her hand trembled. She had seen war zones, corruption, murder. But this made her look nauseous. These weren't just trafficked girls, she whispered. These were auctioned girls. We uploaded everything to 3 secure sources. Nina's editor called in a special investigator, a lawyer, then a security team. Within 48 hours, the first wave of names hit the wire. A judge from Delaware, a real estate mogul in Phoenix, a former congressman, a current sitting CEO of a major pharmaceutical company. Arrests followed. Some tried to flee the country. Some tried to disappear. One killed himself. The media exploded. Helen Alder, once a battered, voiceless wife, was suddenly the woman who exposed a trafficking empire. Sasha and Danica were protected under alias names. We were moved to a safe location. For a moment, just one moment, I believed it might finally be over. Until I got the call. Micah's number popped up on my screen. But when I answered, it wasn't his voice. It was Kyle's. Hello, Mother, he said, like a bad joke. My throat closed. How did you get this phone? I snapped. You made quite a mess, he said. But then again, you always were dramatic. I heard Micah's voice in the background. Muffled. Gagged. Don't hurt him. I screamed. Don't you dare. You'll shut your mouth, he hissed. You think exposing Dad redeems you? You think dragging my name through the dirt wins you medals? You did that yourself, I spat. He chuckled. You're going to fix this. Or I make sure you bury another son. I froze. What do you want? There's a press conference tomorrow. You go on record. You say it was all lies. Fabricated. You were mentally unstable. You name Nina. You name Micah. You flipped the whole thing. I won't. You will, he said darkly. Because if you don't, I'll send you pieces of him in a Ziploc bag. I heard Micah scream through the phone. It gutted me, like lightning through my ribs. And then the call ended. Sasha found me slumped on the floor. She called Nina. We didn't call the police. Because if Kyle was behind this, if Kyle had Micah, then this wasn't a legal game anymore. This was war. We tracked the call to a warehouse district outside Denver. Sasha, God bless her, said she'd come with me. Danica insisted on joining. She stood in front of me and said, I've hidden long enough. We found the warehouse. It was guarded. 2 men at the door. Sasha created a distraction. Danica slid through the side. I crept in behind. We found Micah strapped to a chair. Beaten. Bloody. But breathing. I knelt beside him, whispering, I'm here. Then I heard the voice behind me. Touch him again, and I'll put a hole in your skull. Kyle. Older now. Colder. Eyes like a man who never cried in his life. He held a gun to my head. And I smiled. Because he never saw Danica behind him. She cracked a metal pipe across his knees. He went down screaming. Micah surged forward, headbutt one of the guards. Blood everywhere. I grabbed the gun, stood over Kyle. He was begging now. Please, Mom. Please. The words I used to cry. The words I used to scream from the bottom of that marriage bed when Frank used his fists instead of his mouth. I stepped over Kyle, looked him in the eye, and said, You had a choice. You chose your father. Now you can join him in hell. Then I pulled the trigger. Click. Empty. Micah had taken the bullets. I collapsed. Sobbing. He knelt beside me. It's over, he whispered. You won. No, I said. I survived. That's not the same. We turned Kyle over to the FBI. The press tried to paint me a vigilante. Some called me a hero. Some said I went too far. I didn't care. I buried every dress Frank ever bought me. Every letter Kyle ever wrote. Every picture. I kept only one photo. Me and Micah, smiling. Not because we were healed, but because we made it. And that was more than most could say. If you've ever been screamed at behind closed doors, slapped and then told it was your fault, tied to a chair while the man you gave your life to laughed as your own son watched. This is your story too. And before I begin, if this reached a part of your soul you've tried to keep quiet, I want you to do 3 things. 1. Like this video. 2. Comment where you're from. 3. And tell me, have you ever survived something you thought would kill you? This is the final chapter of my story. And I'm not whispering anymore. It took 12 years for the attic door to finally swing shut. Permanently. I stood in front of that rotting house one last time. The house where I lost everything, my dignity, my bones, my voice. And now I had one thing Frank never planned for. Power. Not the kind men put in bank accounts. The kind you earn when you're still breathing after the storm that should have drowned you. Micah stood beside me, holding the gas can. Sasha handed me the match. The FBI had everything they needed. The property had been cleared, condemned, but not cleansed. So I did what no court could. I burned it. I burned the attic. The chair where they tied me. The belts he used. The walls that muffled my screams while neighbors turned up their TVs and told themselves they heard nothing. I watched it all go up in flames. And I didn't cry. Not because it didn't hurt, but because it finally did. Because somewhere, a woman in Wisconsin or Idaho or maybe even across the sea, some 63-year-old woman with arthritis and a crooked smile and no one left to believe her, is watching this right now, and she knows exactly what I mean when I say, I don't want justice. I want memory. I want Frank's name to be remembered for what it really was. Not a father. Not a husband. A butcher. And I want Kyle to rot in a cell, telling himself it was worth it, only to remember every day that he was outsmarted by the same woman he helped tie up like a dog. Danica is safe now. Sasha is starting a foundation to find the other girls. Micah, he's finally sleeping without the light on. And me? I'm not healing. I'm building. A little house on the edge of Colorado. No attic. No locks on the bedroom door. A front porch with a rocking chair and no ghosts in the rafters. People ask if I ever forgave them. No. I forgave myself for staying so long. But then? They don't get forgiveness. They get remembrance. They get the mirror held to their faces. And they get the fear that someone else, some other quiet little woman in some other little house, is watching this and deciding today is the last day she'll take it. That's what this is. Not a story. A warning. And a weapon. Thank you for watching. If this story touched you, share it. Let it reach someone who needs it. Comment where you're from, and if you've ever seen the face of betrayal in your own mirror. And if no one's told you today, I believe you. I see you. And you're not done yet. This was the attic door stayed locked for 12 years, but I kicked it down. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Twisted Tales and Truths. I'll be back. We all will.